He thought it was just another routine stop. Colin Dixon had just finished another long shift managing the Securitas cash depot in Tunbridge, Kent. Tired, ready to get home to his wife and son, he was driving the familiar country roads when flashing blue lights lit up behind him. A police stop. Nothing unusual, until it was. What Colin didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that this wasn't the police. This was the opening move in a heist so bold, so devastating, that it would rewrite British criminal history. Before we dive into this jaw-dropping story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Because by the end of this video, you'll see how one fake arrest led to the biggest cash robbery in UK history, and the gang that thought they'd gotten away with it. Colin pulled over without hesitation. The unmarked police car behind him was convincing enough, and the two uniformed officers approached his window with the ease of practiced authority. But Colin had been trained for this moment. As a high-level manager of a major cash depot, protocol was clear. If stopped, identify yourself, ask to be escorted to the nearest station, and under no circumstance, none, get in the vehicle. He was even supposed to carry a panic alarm. But tonight, his alarm was broken. And for reasons no one fully understands, Colin ignored every rule he was meant to follow. He climbed into the back seat of the car. And just like that, he vanished off the grid. What had really happened was chilling. The officers were criminals, some ex-cage fighters, some small-time crooks, all desperate. The uniforms were props. The car was a replica. And this wasn't a random crime. This was a mission planned for nearly a year. Burner phones, surveillance footage, disguises, an insider on the payroll. Every detail had been rehearsed, every route clocked, every weakness mapped. Colin Dixon was just the first domino to fall in a tightly orchestrated operation. And now that they had him, it was time to get what they really wanted. Let's rewind. The mastermind behind this whole plan? A man called Lee Murray. A South London kid turned rising MMA star, nicknamed Lightning for his explosive talent in the ring. He had the skills, the fame, the sponsors. UFC had signed him. He'd won his debut fight. His future was supposed to be set. But life had other plans. And so did Lee. One night, Lee was out celebrating at a swanky Mayfair nightclub for a model's birthday party. A fight broke out, brutal and chaotic. Lee, loyal to his friend, stepped in to help. It was a decision that nearly cost him his life. Stabbed in the head, in the chest, in the heart. His lung collapsed. His artery was severed. He was clinically dead, resuscitated 4 times on the table. Doctors said even if he lived, he might never function again. But Lee didn't just survive. He walked out of the hospital in 10 days. In a month, he was back training. But the UFC wouldn't clear him to fight. His visa was denied. His dream, gone. So Lee made a choice. If he couldn't earn the money in the ring, he'd take it from the vault. Lee's crew had been eyeing a building in Tunbridge for months. It looked like an ordinary warehouse. No signs, no logos. But inside, it was a fortress holding up to £200 million in cash, a central hub for distributing money across the UK. They called it Medway House, one of the most secure facilities in the country. And yet, it had cracks. Real ones. And Lee had a crew crazy enough to slip through them. Lee wasn't alone. There was Lee Rusha and Jetmir BP Barper, the original scouts who found the depot. Then came Stuart Royal, a debt-ridden car dealer with access to a secluded farm. That farm would soon become the gang's headquarters. They added Sean Lupton, a construction worker who fantasized about pulling a heist so much that he watched Ocean's 11 daily. Then came Roger Coots, a childhood friend with access to a shipping container. And Paul Allen, Lee's right-hand man and errand. And finally, the most important piece, Amir Heisnaj, their inside man, an Albanian immigrant who got a job at the depot using fake credentials and began leaking critical security details. Amir spent months quietly collecting data from inside the facility. Who had the keys? Which staff worked which shifts? Where the cameras were blind? Which doors required cards or codes? To make it airtight, the gang even gave him spy cameras to film inside the building, sneaking the footage back to the crew to rehearse their plan. They knew the depot inside out before they ever stepped foot near it. But they had one last problem: faces. Some of them would need to show their faces while dressed as cops, which meant they'd be identifiable on CCTV. That's where Lee made another smart move. He went to an old friend, Michael Demetria, a hairdresser in London. Through him, he found Michelle Hogg, a trainee stylist with a diploma in theatrical makeup and prosthetics. He spun a story: "We're working on a video game, and we need disguises." Michelle agreed, thinking it was all for show. She didn't know she was building the faces of Britain's most wanted criminals. February 21, 2006. Colin's wife Lynn was growing nervous. Her husband wasn't home. He wasn't answering his phone. Dinner had gone cold. The clock was ticking. Then there was a knock at the door. Two men, dressed like police officers. They told her Colin had been in a car crash. They needed her and their 8-year-old son to come to the hospital. Confused and panicked, Lynn agreed. They even waited while she woke up the boy. But something felt wrong. The men were too muscular, too eager. And when she asked for ID, one of them snapped, forcing her and the boy into a car at gunpoint. Lynn wasn't going to the hospital. She was going to the same isolated farm where her husband was being held. And with that, the trap was fully sprung. Colin sat in the back of the van, hands bound, eyes darting around the unfamiliar barn where he was now imprisoned. Moments later, another van pulled up. The door slid open. His wife, Lynn, and their son were shoved inside. The moment their eyes met, something in Colin broke. His job was to protect his family, but now they were all prisoners. His silence, his resistance, it all melted away. The message was clear: cooperate, or watch your family suffer. And so, he talked. He told them everything: codes, cameras, schedules, where the cash was stored, who would be there, and when. They wrote it all down, nodding, already knowing some of the details thanks to Emir. Colin was no longer just a hostage. He was now the key to opening the vault. While Colin and his family remained tied up at the farm, the gang made final preparations. Vehicles were parked and hidden at Stuart Royal's friend's farm. A white box truck would serve as the main transport. The back was cleared, reinforced to carry literal tons of cash. Inside one van was a case packed with weapons: a 9mm pistol, a Scorpion machine pistol, a pump-action shotgun, and even an AK-47. Lee Murray checked over his gear in silence. Paul Allen fidgeted nervously. Roger Coots cracked jokes no one laughed at. They weren't a professional crew. They weren't even smart. But they were ready to act. This wasn't about elegance. It was about brute force and timing. 1:21 a.m., February 22, 2006. Kane Patterson, still dressed as a police officer, was driving the lead car with Colin Dixon in the passenger seat. The plan was to make everything look normal. Colin would speak over the intercom, and the night shift would let them through. But something unexpected happened. The usual security guard wasn't there. It was a last-minute replacement, a young, inexperienced employee named Gary Barlow. He wasn't familiar with every protocol. So when he saw Colin's face and a uniformed officer in the passenger seat, he didn't ask questions. He buzzed them in. And just like that, the gang was inside. As soon as they were in, Colin and Kane made straight for the control room. Gary barely had time to ask what was happening when he was zip-tied to a chair. Kane moved fast, checking security cameras and entry buttons. Colin, following instructions, moved one of the CCTV cameras slightly. It was a quiet alarm trigger, a signal that should have alerted the local police. But that night, no one was watching. Colin pressed the main access button. The big green light turned on, and the gates opened for the rest of the crew. The white truck and van rolled in. 4 armed men stepped out: Lee Murray, Stopwatch; Paul Allen, Hoodie; Leah Rusha, Shorty; and Roger Coots, Mr. Average. Each had a gun, a mask, and a job. They burst into the lobby. Staff were rounded up, zip-tied, forced to the ground. Plastic ties cut into their wrists. Some cried. Others stared blankly. Colin tried not to make eye contact. This was no longer a robbery. It was a siege. The vault doors opened. Inside were wire cages stacked with cash, more than £200 million in all denominations. But there was a problem. The cages were enormous, heavy, each weighing over 1/4 of a ton. They could only be moved by forklift, and none of the robbers knew how to operate one. So they untied Tony Mason, a depot worker trained for it. Tony tried to stall, crashing the forklift into walls, pretending not to know what he was doing. But they weren't buying it. Finally, Colin was forced to try. But even he struggled. Frustrated, the robbers began physically grabbing armfuls of notes and running them to the truck. For 66 minutes, they moved as fast as they could. Cages were rolled out. Bundles were shoved into bags. 3 trolleys disappeared into the truck. All while Lynn and her son sat terrified in the back of the transport vehicle. Eventually, they were moved outside and made to kneel by the wall, facing away, hands bound. By 2:26 a.m., the robbers had cleared 17 cages, totaling £53 million, a fortune beyond imagination. But it wasn't all of it. They left £153 million still in the vault. Why? Because they were out of time. The final step: contain the hostages. The robbers herded staff into the now empty cash cages. Designed for money, not people, they were cramped, cold, and dark. 2 to a cage. No room to sit upright. Plastic ties still tight on wrists. They debated what to do with Colin. Kill him? Leave him? In the end, they shoved him into a cage too. No mercy. No exceptions. The white truck, now loaded with millions, was driven out first by Stuart Royal and Jetmir Barper. Then the others followed in their separate vehicles. Lee Murray didn't look back. He had dreamed of this moment for months. He was no longer a fighter. He was a legend. They vanished into the night. And for a brief, shining moment, they had gotten away with it. The hostages waited. Afraid. Silent. Listening. Then someone remembered. Mel Sampson, a staff member, had a key in her back pocket. Her hands were tied, but Lynn's young son was small enough to slip through the bars. He retrieved the key, unlocked the cage, and the staff freed themselves. It was over. Or so they thought. They dialed 999, told the dispatcher what happened. But no one believed it. How much was taken? The operator asked. Tens of millions, Colin said. And with that, the nightmare had just begun. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. The depot employees, now freed and trembling, clustered together outside the Medway house as the first real officers arrived on the scene. News spread like wildfire. The flashing blue lights weren't coming for Colin this time. They were coming for what was already being called the largest cash heist in British history. Officers from every nearby precinct were called in. Detectives began interviewing traumatized staff, trying to make sense of the operation. But one fact hit hard: £53 million was gone without a single alarm going off. By 10 a.m., major news outlets were broadcasting live from outside the depot. The press was calling it the heist of the century. Citizens were glued to their TVs. Securitas Cash Management, one of the world's most trusted cash handlers, was on the verge of collapse. Analysts warned of a ripple effect if insurance claims couldn't cover the loss. Behind closed doors, Securitas executives were in meltdown mode. Police weren't starting from scratch. They had CCTV footage from the depot, a partial witness statement from a shaken Colin Dixon, and a list of depot employees who may have let something slip. One of the first lucky breaks came when a tipster reported an abandoned van outside the Hook and Hatchet pub. Inside, a grey glove, a balaclava, receipts, and, most damning of all, a vehicle invoice. The van had been purchased under Stuart Royal's name. Suddenly, a name, a face, and a thread to pull. Michelle Hogg was finally relaxing at home when her mother mentioned the robbery. Michelle's heart sank. She had helped Lee Murray with prosthetic disguises, believing it was for a video game. Now she realized she may have just aided the biggest cash robbery in the country. When her boss, Michael Demetrius, appeared at her door with an envelope of cash and a thinly veiled warning, she panicked. She dumped everything: prosthetics, paint, silicone, into garbage bags and dragged them to the curb. She had no idea police were already watching. At 1 p.m., Michael Demetrius was arrested. By 2:30 p.m., officers kicked in Michelle's door. They found her curled up on the stairs, terrified. In the trash bin outside, they uncovered damning evidence. Michelle was charged with conspiracy to commit armed robbery. But she wasn't going down alone. Her statement became a linchpin of the case. 2 days later, another unexpected twist. Police raided the van of Chris Boulis, a former Olympian. Inside, they found a duffel bag containing a bulletproof vest, balaclava, shotgun shells, and £1.3 million in cash. Boulis claimed the bag belonged to two friends, Lee Rusha and Jetmir Barpa. His story checked out, but now police had two new primary suspects. On February 25th, police launched coordinated raids on Jetmir and Lee's homes. At Jetmir's house, his wife was cooking dinner and claimed he wasn't home. Police didn't buy it. At Lee's home, they kicked in the patio doors, but it too was empty. Though the men were gone, evidence wasn't. Cable ties, boiler suits, rolls of tape, and shotgun cartridges matching those used in the heist. Confirmation: these men weren't just accessories, they were inside the Medway house that night. 3 days later, Jetmir and Lee made their move, straight into the arms of waiting police. Thinking they were being smart, they visited Jetmir's sister just outside London. The police were already watching. The moment their car neared the flat, officers spiked the tires, swarmed in, and tackled them both before they could run. In custody, neither said a word. Meanwhile, another suspect, Roger Coutts, was enjoying a ski holiday in Switzerland. But back home, his storage unit was searched. Inside, nearly £10 million in stacked, shrink-wrapped notes. When his plane landed in the UK days later, police simply waited for his cab to stop and hauled him out. Another domino fell. With suspects piling up and Michelle turning witness, the investigation was shifting fast. The pressure was on to find the inside man and the heist's elusive ringleader. But Lee Murray was already far away, spending big, sleeping easy, and thinking he'd won. He had no idea the storm coming for him. By the summer of 2006, Lightning Lee Murray and Paul Allen had carved out a new life for themselves in Morocco. From the outside, they were just two wealthy men enjoying an extended vacation. In reality, they were fugitives, key players in the biggest cash robbery in British history. Lee was living large. He purchased a lavish villa in the upscale Suissi district of Rabat for £700,000. Inside the home, he installed oyster shell armchairs, a mural of his 2004 UFC fight, and walk-in closets stuffed with designer clothes. His new Ferrari screamed through the narrow Moroccan streets while a BMW X5 handled his daily errands. The local gossip? That the English millionaires were eccentric, maybe a little shady, but generous with their tips. Lee and Paul didn't just hide, they flaunted it. Every night, they hit the hottest nightclubs in Rabat and Casablanca, often spending thousands on bottle service and imported dancers. They tipped waiters the equivalent of a month's salary, flew in women from London with promises of luxury and cosmetic surgery, and filled their wardrobes with cash instead of clothes. They partied like rock stars, but their faces were on wanted posters across Europe. What Lee and Paul didn't realize was that their freedom was borrowed time. Almost from the moment they arrived, UK authorities had tipped off Moroccan intelligence. Moroccan police put them under 24-hour surveillance, documenting their every move, every purchase, every party. The men thought they were untouchable. They had no idea they were living inside a fishbowl. June 25, 2006. Rabat. Lee and Paul walked into the upscale mega mall, just another day of shopping. But outside, Moroccan police were assembling. 50 officers, 30 of them undercover, took positions around the building. The moment Lee stepped out of Tommy Hilfiger, a swarm descended. Lee bolted, instincts kicking in. He sprinted across the plaza but was leveled by a rugby tackle from behind. Paul, walking out of Starbucks, froze and raised his hands. It was over. Police swarmed the villa that night. Inside, they found 3 handguns, a MAC-10 submachine gun, 2 kilos of cocaine, and nearly £1 million in cash. Custom wardrobes were packed with bundles of bills. The entire house had been turned into a monument to excess, and now, it was a crime scene. The Moroccan government had its hands full, a high-profile arrest with international attention and a criminal with dual citizenship. Morocco doesn't extradite its citizens, and Lee Murray's father was Moroccan. That meant the UK couldn't bring him home. Instead, Lee was charged locally with drug possession, illegal firearms, and resisting arrest. The Sale prison he was sent to was infamous for corruption and brutality. Paul Allen, with no Moroccan heritage, was less fortunate. He was extradited back to Britain, but not before spending nearly 2 years in that same prison. In the UK, the Crown Prosecution Service wasn't taking any chances. Stuart Royal, Leah Rusha, Jetmir Parr, Roger Coates, and Amir Heisnaj stood trial in a court outfitted like a fortress. Snipers on rooftops. Bulletproof glass. £1 million spent on security. Michelle Hogg, the makeup artist, took the stand as the star witness, granted immunity in exchange for full cooperation. Guilty. One by one, the verdicts dropped. Stuart, Leah, Jetmir, and Roger received life with a minimum of 15 years. Amir got 20 years with parole eligibility after 10. The sentences were harsh but symbolic. This was more than justice, it was a warning. In Britain, life didn't mean death behind bars, but it did mean a leash that never loosened. Parole wouldn't come easy. Freedom would always be conditional. In May 2008, Paul Allen was flown back to London in a helicopter. Ground transport was deemed too dangerous. His trial began at the Old Bailey, but the first jury couldn't agree on a verdict. Facing a second trial, Paul cut a deal. He pled guilty to conspiracy to rob and denied carrying any weapons. The judge sentenced him to 18 years. Meanwhile in Morocco, Lee Murray's trials dragged on. In June 2010, he was convicted for masterminding the Securitas heist and sentenced to 10 years. But prosecutors weren't satisfied. They appealed and won. On November 30, 2010, the sentence was raised to 25 years. In 2016, he was transferred to Tiflet 2, a brutal supermax prison. His projected release, 2035. He remains locked away, the mastermind of the largest cash robbery in British history, now serving hard time in a concrete cage. More than £32 million from the heist has never been recovered. Some of the culprits remain at large. If you found this story gripping, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next deep dive into the world of high-stakes crime. Leave a comment. Do you think Lee Murray will ever walk free? Or did the system finally catch up to Britain's most wanted cage fighter?